boosting intra-Africa trade under the AFCFTA, that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We have with us a wonderful panel to discuss this subject. We have with us Mr. Anthony Nyamibefi, Ghana's Chief Trade Negotiator on the AFCFTA and Senior Technical Officer at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We have with us Superintendent Simon Asaase, Head of International Relations and Cooperation Section at the Ghana Immigration Service. We have with us Mr. Bernard Afre, Senior Research and Planning Officer at the Ghana International Trade Commission. We have with us Mr. Chonam Cleanse Apelo, CEO of Siku Technology and AGI Greater Accra Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
As you all may know, trading under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area was launched in January this year. For the AFCFTA to reach its full potential, a number of challenges need to be addressed. The African continent is woefully deficient in enhanced modes of transport, coupled with poor communication networks, inefficient customs delivery systems, political disruptions, unfavorable business environments, etc. And these are only a few of what many fear could undermine the AFCFTA project or position, and consequently Africa's trade competitiveness. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area has become a relevant issue for quite a number of reasons. Unquestionably, it is the only geographical location within the global space that has practicalized the concept of a continental free trade area. There is EU, some might say, but a large part of the EU, or actually not the EU, but rather Europe, is not part of the EU. Despite almost every African country having endorsed the takeoff of its operationalization, the outbreak of COVID-19 has affected the expected initial vim of the AFCFTA. And like a domino effect, the pandemic continues to unleash serious problems which are negatively impacting the global economy, of which the AFCFTA is part. But there is hope. There is no doubt that the implementation of the AFCFTA will contribute to enhancing the much-awaited development of Africa. Some also think that the institutionalization of AFCFTA will come with its consequential problems, most of them perceived, of course. The logical approach of AFCFTA to boost intra-Africa trade is to review all forms of customs, applicable tariff and non-applicable tariff regimes that have the tendency to disrupt targeted trade flows projected by the bloc. And so with us, we are going to be discussing these issues are Mr. Anthony Nyamibefi, as earlier on introduced. We have Superintendent Simon Asaase, we've got Mr. Bernard Afre, and then we've got Mr. Chonam Cleanse Apelo. Asaase Business Roundtable is proudly brought to you by Ghana Exim Bank, facilitating Ghana's international trade. Now, we are going to go to the burning question for tonight. As a country, what do we need to do to fully leverage the AFCFTA to our benefit? Now, that goes to you, Mr. Anthony Nyamibefi. You have been with this program since the beginning, and you have been our chief negotiator, and you should be in the best position to answer this question. What do we need to do as a country to fully leverage the AFCFTA to our benefit?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to share ideas and then also sensitize the public on the AFCFTA. For African countries, we adopted the AFCFTA to progressively remove tariff schedules at the various countries in order to boost intra-African trade and also facilitate regional integration. And as you rightly said, it's been observed that there are a lot of challenges. So countries, for countries to benefit from this after, you have to put some measures in place. And because of that, in 2012, when the AU heads of state decided to come out of the AFTA, they also adopted what they call Action Plan to Boost Intra-African Trade. And member states were expected to put certain measures in place to address their clusters. And for the boosting intra-African trade, we have 7 clusters. The first one is you have to put in place your trade policy. You have to facilitate, you have to address your inadequate trade facilitation measures, trade and development finance, enhance productivity, which is industrialization, trade information, factor market, among others. So for Ghana, since 2017, when the present government took over, they realized that for us to address especially the supply capacity so that we can take advantage of these boosting intra-African trade, the government came out with the 10-point industrial transformation agenda to address these clusters. And some of them include the one district, one factory, industrial revitalization and stimulus package. We also have boosting the trading environment. You can also talk about the strategic anchor industries that we have identified to boost our industrial so that we can accelerate growth in GDP. Then, since that period, the government has persistently implementing this industrial transformation agenda. So since the agreement was adopted, now from August 2019, His Excellency, the President, also came out of the national institutional structure so that we can address it. So from that time, we have now come out of action plan, AFC after action plan to enable Ghana improve the production capacity, address the infrastructural constraints, as you said, address trade finance, among others, so that we can take advantage of the export market in Africa.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Anthony Nyamubefi. When we return, we will be talking more about the EFCFTA, how it might have been tailor-made to fit our policies here, or rather, our policies having been tailor-made to fit the EFCFTA. When we get back, we'll be talking about intra-Africa trade and how to boost it. We'll be talking about the movement of cargo. We'll be talking about the rule of origin and other things. We will be back shortly. Welcome back. If you just joined us, we are talking about boosting intra-Africa trade under the AFCFTA with my wonderful guest, Mr. Anthony Nyamubefi, Ghana's Chief Trade Negotiator on the AFCFTA and Senior Technical Officer at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We have Superintendent Simon Asaase, Head of International Relations and Cooperation Section at the Ghana Immigration Service. We've got Mr. Bernard Manu Afro, Senior Research and Planning Officer at the Ghana International Trade Commission. We've got Mr. Chairman Clarence Apelo, CEO of SUKU Technology and AGI Accra Chairman. So, now, we're going to come back to you to open this discussion with us, Mr. Anthony Nyamubefi. We want to talk about boosting intra-Africa trade. You just explained that ahead of the AFCFTA, a roadmap called Boosting Intra-African Trade was rolled out. Now, Ghana has developed its own comprehensive and indigenous intersectoral national action plan for boosting intra-African trade. Can you explain it? You did explain it to a certain extent, but can you explain it? It looks like we are coming out with our own roadmap that mimics this roadmap that was rolled out for Africa, although we've got policies that seem like they have been tailor-made to fit the AFCFTA purpose. What is the purpose of this boosting intra-country trade, as it were?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I would also like to explain that I used to be the chief trade negotiator for quite some time, but now I'm no longer the one, although I'm a technical advisor now, providing inputs into the AFTA and other multilateral and regional trade negotiations. For the Western Intra-African trade, as I said, it has 7 clusters. The first one is to develop your trade policy. In Ghana, already we have trade policy, we have our industrial policy, and so we are on course there. Then the second one is enhancing productive capacity, that is industrialization. And for Ghana, to do that, we have the one district, one factory, the industrial revitalization and stimulus package. We have also come out with 10 strategic anchor initiatives, like the automobile industry. We're also looking at industrial starch, mainly from cassava. We are talking about industrial salt. We're also talking about plastics and oil products. We have aluminum and integrated project. And then we have pharmaceuticals, which we have the comparative advantage in West Africa, to explain to that one. When it comes to trade facilitation, also we have the ongoing customs management reforms, including the ICON, which will now allow people to electronically clear their imports, exports, and then transit trade. Then when you come to trade-related infrastructure, both transportation and communication, you're also thinking about improvement of our ports at Tema, Takoradi. In case of the airport also, we are doing that, and now the government is even upgrading the Tamale port and Kumasi port. And then when you come to trade finance also, the government has entered into collaboration with some banks locally who are helping to finance most of the one district, one factory companies in the country. We also have the Exim Bank that negotiated with even the US Bank to get some 300 million US funding to support industrialization so that the manufacturers can import machineries and equipment from there. We also have other concessional financial packages that the government is addressing, including the COVID-adjusted program to support SMEs, among others. So we, in effect, have a lot of things in place. And then under trade information, to enable people know where they can source maybe imports from Africa and also take advantage to export to Africa also. We're going to leverage use the Ghana Export Promotion Authority TradeNet to do just that, and also link it up with what we call the African Trade Observatory.
So it looks like a lot of planning is going into this, and here we're talking about Ghanaians taking advantage of this whole framework. What we have not heard much of, I mean, we've heard about all these trade platforms and how to help boost trade among nations, but we've not really heard much about labor. Because with AFCFTA, we are going to see a sudden relaxing of visa regimes, and so people are going to be able to travel across countries. And so 1 million unemployed African youths enter the labor market monthly, as it were. And the AFCFTA, through the promotion of more labor-intensive trade, has the potential to produce more jobs for the estimated 30 million African youth who would be entering the job market each year after 2030. That's quite a lot, isn't it, Superintendent Simon Asare? Now, are we ready for the projected labor-intensive trade with other states?
Thank you very much. When you look critically to the African Union's Agenda 2063, and as you rightly mentioned, when we project ahead to about 2030, when we look at the various provisions set by the African Union's protocol relating to free movement of labor, we realize that each provision has been categorically and clearly stated that the rules and regulations of host member states will apply in terms of labor mobility. So let me give you a simple example. So when we have Ghana as the secretariat of the AFCFTA, it is likely that we are going to have a lot of our neighbors, African nationals, coming into the country to do business, coming for conferences, and coming for other programs, others coming even for the employment opportunity, as you mentioned. But we are going to regulate this based on the Ghana Immigration Service Act, Act 2005-73. We're looking at the GIPC Act, and then the Labour Act itself. So you realize that we are in a rightful position to manage the situation, because the Ghanaians will also be seeking out employment outside our country, because there will be that free of movement. Visa regimes, as you mentioned, for instance, Ghana was the first country to relax its visa regime and provided visa on arrival for all EU nationals who are coming into Ghana for business, tourism, and even studies. So you can arrive at the Kotoka or any of our entry points as an African national, and then you are issued with a visa on arrival. And it is Ghana who started this. So that's a very good opportunity that places on an advantage.
Mr. Bernard Menafre, now the Trade Commission has been at the forefront of this development. So we're looking at both labor, we're looking at trade between countries. Would you care to elaborate on what Mr. Anthony Bafi said about boosting African trade, intra-African trade?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. You realize that Mr. Bafi highlighted on the clusters under the BIAT, called the BIAT is the boosting intra-African trade. Mm-hmm. Somebody may wonder what is even intra-African trade. It's not really a technical word, and it's nothing too new. In fact, on the African continent, before we were partitioned along political boundaries, we had kingdoms, communities, and societies which traded amongst themselves. And in this case, we're really going to have the African continent now putting things in place. So the difference that you can see is that now things have been codified, and you now have processes of ratification and all that. So it's basically the same exchange of goods and services that is going to go on. And so that's why under the AFTA, you observe that the protocols, the first two protocols that were operationalized, which is the protocol on trade in goods and the protocol on trade in services, seeks to be the cardinal benchmarks for ensuring that this intra-African trade is boosted. And so for us at the Ghana International Trade Commission, anything that has got to do with enhancing the competitiveness of the domestic industry, and here I'm talking about the domestic industry, all the way you want to have the various companies which are within the boundaries of Ghana, we are looking at ensuring that they would not be undermined by cheap imports. And so these cheap imports may not necessarily come from the African markets. They could come from third-party countries outside of Africa. But when they come to undermine the productivity of the domestic industry, there's no way when you go into the African markets you can be competitive enough. So for the Ghana International Trade Commission, any matter or any issue that has got to do with ensuring that we can make the maximum benefit out of this international trade and multilateral agreement is what is our main concern.
Okay, so we will go to the rule of origin briefly because we'll come back and talk more about it. The rule of origin is supposed to protect countries from some of these unfair trade practices where you've got a company based in a foreign country outside Africa that comes to town and changes some of its labels and, sort of penetrates the market unfairly. And it's more than that, I know that. But so how can we ensure that the poorer or least developed countries benefit equally from the AFCFTA as more developed countries when there could be a conflict between trade officials in exporting countries trying to force open markets set against officials in poorer importing countries trying to ensure economic development in their nations through industrial policy space. I know this is a mouthful, but I mean it's all about unfair trade practices that might affect poorer countries who might not have the system to protect themselves, as it were. Mr. Abefi.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. In negotiating the AFTA, the various economies of the African Union member states were taken into consideration. And if you look at the UN definition, in Africa, we have developing countries and least developed countries. And unfortunately, the developing countries are about 1/3 and the LDCs are 2/3. So if you look at the tariff liberalization schedule that was agreed, they took that into consideration. So the least developed countries are going to take longer periods to progressively liberalize their tariff liberalization to ensure that it doesn't harm the economy. So for the liberalization, the developed countries are going to use 5 years to liberalize 90% of their products, then additional 5 years to liberalize their sensitive products, making it 10 years. Then they will not liberalize 3% of their products, which we call the exclusive list. Then for the least developed countries, they are going to use 10 years to liberalize 90% of their products. Then they are going to use additional 3 years to liberalize 7% of their sensitive products, and then we will still retain the 3%. So they are going to use 13 years as against 10 years. So that is it. Then in the agreement, as the gentleman from GITC said, there is an annex on trade remedies. So if you feel that your country is unfairly not being treated, you can take advantage of the trade remedy measures, namely the anti-dumping duties, countervailing measures, and the safeguards to protect your companies who are unfairly being treated.
All right, so when we get back, we're going to be talking about issues like payments and fintech, that is financial technology and payment systems. We will be talking more about the boosting of intra-Africa trade, and we will be touching again on the rule of origin. That is when we get back. Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're talking about things pertaining to the Africa Free Trade Area. We are talking about boosting intra-Africa trade under the AFCFTA with Mr. Anthony Nyame-Bofi, Ghana's Chief Trade Negotiator on the AFCFTA and Senior Technical Officer at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We are also talking to Superintendent Simon Asaase, Head of International Relations and Cooperation Section at the Ghana Immigration Service. We also have with us Mr. Bernard Menu Afre, Senior Research and Planning Officer, Ghana International Trade Commission. We have with us Mr. Chonam Cleans Apilo, CEO of Suku Technology and AGI Greater Accra. Now, before we left off, we were about to touch on the rule of origin. Now, how can we ensure that poorer or least developed countries benefit equally from the AFCFTA as more developed countries when it comes, or when there could be a conflict between trade officials in exporting countries trying to force open markets set against officials in poorer importing countries trying to ensure economic development in their nations through the industrial policy space? Quite a mouthful, but let's try and make sense of this, Mr. Anton Befi.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the agreement has enough provisions in it to actually protect the least developed countries from unnecessarily being exploited. The first one is that for the tariff liberalization period, the developing countries are going to take 10 years, and then the least developed countries are going to take 13 years. The secondly, also, the annex on trade remedies also make provision that if member states feel that their trading are not fair, being fairly treated, they can apply provision and under the trade remedies by imposing anti-dumping duties, safeguards measures, and then countervailing duties. The third one is that the African Export and Import Bank has also made available initially 1 billion adjustment facility so that for countries who will be adversely affected in terms of loss of revenue and other things for implementing the agreement, then they can also apply for that facility to do the appropriate adjustment. Then finally, in the agreement also, there is provision that when a country, a member state is facing challenges with balance of payments and exceptional balance of payment difficulties and others, they can also apply to temporarily suspend implementation of the agreement. So, and then if you look at the progressive nature of the liberalization, it will enable individual countries to adjust in the long run so that the economies do not collapse.
So talking about this brings us straight to payment systems and fintech. I mean, there can be no trade without exchange of money. So we need to talk about money. And we have so many currencies across Africa, and some people want to make sense of it. We need to have a common currency, a lot of people have been saying. Now, there appears to be existing local financial technological innovations that are catering to the financial inclusion needs of individual African member states. In Kenya, we're talking M-Pesa. Here in Ghana, we've got Momo, that is mobile money. And then, of course, there are countries which are yet to catch up. Now, general payment platforms like PayPal, Paystack, World, Remit, etc. are not continent-wide. Now, Mr. Chunam, how do we bridge the payment systems gap while at the same time taking into consideration anti-money laundering policies? Because this is very important. To make this work, we have to ensure that people are not laundering their money in the system, or else we're just going to have a system that just doesn't work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, I'd like to begin by really saying that Ghana has had a history of reforming its financial policy framework to make it more compatible with emerging trends. In recent times, the Bank of Ghana has lived up to its oversight responsibilities by reigning in the fintech sector of the country. In fact, the Ministry of Finance has promulgated the Digital Financial Service Policy, which, among other things, placed emphasis on fintech and so on. But really, that's a recent issue of cryptocurrency and distributed ledger technology. Cryptocurrency really presents both threats and opportunities. But generally, you realize that most governments either do nothing about it or actually ban it. But the reality is that it's a serious, issue that ought to be addressed properly if we're going to consider going forward in integrating or looking for the best payment systems in order to trade. There are several cryptocurrencies that are available for the to be used in the market. However, because there's no clarity in regulation and policy, it's making it difficult to adopt some of these cryptocurrencies to use. I'm sure you're aware of the letter that the Nigerian government has written.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. We'll come to that. So let's just continue away from that. We'll come to that and talk more extensively about that.
Well, yeah. So going forward about the different fintech products that are available. So you see that mobile money is really doing quite well, especially in countries like Kenya and Ghana. The M-Pesa in Kenya is really very common, and the mobile money in Ghana is very common. The reality is that it is very easy to set up a mobile money outlet. In Ghana alone, we've had over 183,000 mobile money outlets. I mean, this is by Bank of Ghana. So it's easy to set up. But these successes struck by mobile money is only within intra-country trading.
Right.
It doesn't translate outside the country. This is because the technologies is designed and is governed by those countries' central banks' regulations. So what we need to be doing is to be able to create a system that allows for integration across borders. And typically, to be fair, there are several remittances systems as well. But it's not as simple as mobile money, how mobile money operates within a country. It is expensive to engage in remittances and so on. Sometimes it takes forever to reclaim your remittances. So what we need to do now is to ask the central banks to consistently meet and resolve the issue of allowing the mobile monies to speak to each other in order to have seamless transaction across borders.
All right, so what we're trying to do now is to touch on many, very important points. They might not seem to be communicating with each other, but then they're all going to come together as we go towards the end. Now, to you, Mr. Bernard Menu-Afre, Africa will soon be rubbing shoulders with global giants in the realm of continental trade activity. What are some of the trade policy strategies to ensure that the AFCFTA is able to neutralize any possible attempt by the giants to undermine the continent's efforts in ways that may lead to the exiting of countries who might see some activities as being grossly unfair to them?
Okay, thank you very much. I would approach this question from two aspects. You observe that Mr. Befi highlighted trade remedies. Yes, at the multilateral level, the agreement incorporates the provisions of trade remedies, and this is a WTO concept that has been adopted into the AFTA agreement. So we go to articles 17 through to 20 of the agreement, you find it. And also there's under the Annex 9 of the Protocol on Trade in Goods, you find trade remedies dedicated to that portion. And the GITC is the mandated body to address trade remedies in Ghana. And what we do is receive petitions from affected companies or institutions who then approach us to make their case. And so we go through a lot of procedures. We do conduct investigation, we evaluate various complaints. In fact, we conduct hearing just like we have in a courtroom. So the GITC body is like a quasi-judicial body, and so we uphold the fundamental principles of the WTO.
And what is your relationship with the AFCFTA secretariats and other trading blocs across Africa?
Yes, so you observe under the African, as I said, under the AFTA, you have that component, Part 5, which is Article 17 to 20, dedicated to trade remedies. The AFTA is expected to have a subcommittee on trade remedies, and the GITC will be well represented in talks with the Secretariat on that. However, let me point out that as part of the 7 clusters that will be ensuring the boosting of intra-African trade, we also have a role to play in enhancing the competitiveness of the local industry. And so that when they go out there into other markets, they can thoroughly and adequately compete with the other countries. So under the AFTA, we have the multilateral level, which is also, you can also have a settlement of disputes. You observe that if a country wants to exit the multilateral agreement, it's because perhaps it has issues with another country. But luckily, under the AFTA agreement, there's a protocol dedicated to that. You didn't have that under the ETLS, which is the Economic Trade Liberalization Scheme in the ECOWAS. We don't have that, but now we have it under AFTA. So that mechanism is there to ensure that their countries don't exit the AFTA. At the state party level, we also have Ghana has also got the local content laws, which is to ensure that we are able to observe let me put it this way. The content law is to ensure that the skills of those foreign companies who will be coming on board don't just remit the monies and take away the skills and utilize our resources. So the local content law will obviously protect that transfer of skills.
All right, so let me segue to Superintendent Simon Asaase. We're talking about people stealing our skills, so there's that labor aspect to this whole new trade area that we really need to address with seriousness. Now, with particular interest in resident permits, non-citizen identification, work permit, and the like, we cannot just let anybody into our labor market. But some come with specialist knowledge. As we are taking away from others are taking away from us. Now, what policies are in place or being put in place to facilitate the exchange of labor among partner states?
Thank you very much. As you mentioned, when you look at Section 28 of the Immigration Act 2000 at Fact 73, you will notice that for such category of expatriates coming into our country, there are conditions of issuing work and residence permits to them. And the conditions are that, for instance, if, let me use Asaase FM. Asaase FM was brought...
Actually, let me correct you, it's Asaase Radio.
Okay, Asaase Radio, thank you. Asaase Radio has brought in certain equipment that upon advertisement, they have not gotten any Ghanaian qualified to install and maintain this equipment. Then they had to import that kind of skill from outside. And when we bring in this expatriate, now the condition is that it is incumbent upon us as a radio to ensure that there is a Ghanaian or an indigenous staff of Asaase Radio understudying this fellow for a period of 1 year. If the Ghanaian is not able to pick up for that period, they need to extend the permit for this expatriate or for this specialist skill. And when that is done, the indigenous domain of Asaase Radio takes over. So there are policies and there are regulations to regulate. Exactly. So that is what will happen.
Okay. And let's take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to revisit a few of the things that we have been talking about, including rule of origin, but mostly we're going to be talking about payment systems like fintech technology, and we're going to be talking about cryptocurrency, as Mr. Chonam Clarence Apelu was trying to unpack. And this case between Nigeria and Kenya, as it were. So when we get back, we will be talking about all these things. Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Asaase Business Roundtable, and we're talking about the AFCFTA. We're talking about boosting intra-Africa trade with our panelists here today. So before the break, we were talking about the rule of origin. We also, before then, spoke about payment systems and fintech. And so the very first in this last segment is the rule of origin. Now, one of the biggest challenges facing the Ghanaian local trade industry, especially relating to trade relations with its African neighbors, has been the issue of the rule of origin. We had some problems with Nigeria not too long ago. Now, how can we ensure that the rule of origin is not abused by third countries that want to take advantage of the preferential trade regime that is changing, product labels, as I said earlier on, and flooding our markets with such products that affect our sector?
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. So far, the member states have crafted and agreed on 81% of the tariff lines for the rules of origin. And those ones are business friendly. And those ones are to ensure that third parties cannot take advantage of it. So they have now come out with what they call the Appendix 4. That will be attached to the Annex 2 on rules of origin. And each member state is expected to indicate the competence authority. So for Ghana, we have indicated that GRA Customs Division is the competent authority. So they will scrutinize when you apply to export under the AFTA, and when they are satisfied, then they will issue the AFTA rules of origin certificate to you. In the same balance also, they have been mandated to scrutinize imports coming into the country, and if they doubt the certificate, the rules of origin certificate that is attached under the AFTA, they have the right to request for more information from the importing country. So what in Ghana we are doing is that the GRA Customs Division has now come out with a training program to train the custom officers on how the rules of origins are arrived at and how they can detect fake ones, and then if they are not in conformity. Meanwhile, they are also training trainers, so that it will be ongoing, and then they will be able to apply it. In the agreement also, there are sanctions. So if you're a member state and you connive with an exporter and then issue fraudulent rules of origin, then the country can also be sanctioned under the rules of origin. So it has been crafted in that way. And the expectation is that the remaining 12% of the rules of origin that will cover specialized products, it will follow suit. So now I think that it would be extremely difficult for people to just import some product from a third country, just check the labels and then take advantage of it.
I'm sure there are going to be technologies that will help us detect such fraudulent acts. Mm-hmm. And so talking about technology, let's go back to another passionate issue that would be perhaps the mode of exchange in terms of currencies and how we might or might not, through our policies, enhance trans-border trade, because if Ghana is using cedi and Nigeria is using Naira, how do we trade among ourselves? How do small businesses trade among themselves without necessarily boosting another country's currency, that is the dollar. So now technological innovations in financial services are increasingly transforming the way financial services are provided. Now this presents both opportunities and risks to consumers and investors, and more broadly to traditional financial institutions. In context, recently we saw the Nigerian government banning cryptocurrency as though in a counter policy move. The Kenyan government also announced plans to incorporate crypto into its financial policy. Now, how do we adjust our financial policy framework to harmonize these disparities, like what happened between Nigeria and Kenya? Well, it didn't happen between them, but they had policies that seemed to be at polar opposites. And what guidelines will be put in place regarding these emerging technologies?
Great, thank you. So it's important to begin by saying that any agreement of a high-profile agreement of that of AFTA would obviously have mechanisms to sort out settlements and payments and so on. So naturally, AFTA has got its own agreement, which I'm sure Mr. Yamibefi will speak more about. But what is important at this moment is to see clearly what works for us as Africans, or what works at least for the future as far as technology is concerned. As you know, on a daily basis, there are new technology trends popping up. So are we abreast with modern technologies and payments? So that brings to question about the situation of Nigeria and Kenya, really. My personal view is that Africa, it's highly gerontocratic. It's highly governed by very elderly people, and so most of them are far removed from realities of modern technology. So they shy away, because if you look at the Nigerian cryptocurrency directive, where they are banning cryptocurrency, it's obvious that they do not realize the significance of cryptocurrency in modern day transaction. The truth is that you cannot ban cryptocurrency because that's not the way to go. The way to go, in my view, is that countries must begin to set up committees of experts to review the entire system of cryptocurrency and recommend what works for each country to take. I guess that's what the Kenyan attempt to do, and actually make sure that it incorporate these suggestions and make it work.
All right, so Mr. Bernard Manu Afre, talking about payment systems, I understand there is one that is being developed under the Afri-Exim Bank, under an Afri-Exim Bank initiative, isn't it?
Yes, the AFTA agreement recognizes the need for exchange of finances and all that, and it appears that our focus will be more on goods, but services is also part of the agreement. There's a protocol on trade and services. So if somebody is a technology man or computer scientist or whatever it is, can be in Ghana and exchange service with somebody in Kenya. And the payment platform is what is being developed on one of the payment platforms. It's called the PAPAS. This is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. So this system has been developed such that as a commercial bank in your own country, let's say Ghana, you walk in and then all that you need to do is to go through the procedures. And then the receiving party in Kenya or Madagascar, within 24 hours or 48 hours, can receive the amounts involved.
So you don't have to worry about currency conversions.
Yes, the system, what it is that COMESA, which is the common market for Eastern and South African countries, already had something like that, and it was working. So you had countries in Kenya and let's say Namibia exchanging finances, and so it was inspired out of these that the AfCFTA has also developed this purpose, and so it's a welcome inclusion that cryptocurrency would also be looked at by the trade negotiators. And since the technical advisor, my boss, Mr. Murphy, is around, I'm sure he'll throw more light on that.
So can you throw some more light on that? Trans-border trade and the currencies that are being suggested. We are having all these discussions around crypto, and then we're also understanding that the Africa Exim Bank or Afro-Exim Bank is coming up with its own system to help promote exchange of goods among smaller entities across the continent.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Actually, during the African Union Heads of States and Government Summit, the extraordinary summit in July 2019, they adapted some instruments to support the smooth implementation of the AfCFTA. And one of them is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System that Afro-Exim Bank has developed. And the Afro-Exim Bank, what the intention is that it will be possible when you use the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System to get paid. An exporter can be paid within 48 hours initially. Then initially they are going to use the dollar, but after some time they are going to set up clearing houses in the various central banks. So in the process, you can receive payments in your local currency, and in that case, it will reduce the transaction cost of using the dollar for payment. So they are going to, initially they are using the central banks in West Africa as the pilot phase. Then after that, they hope to extend to all the African countries. Then to ensure that these payments are done within some short time, the Afro-Exim Bank has also introduced what they call a due diligence system, which is called the MANSA. They use the acronym of that Mansa Musa, who was diligent in his financial management. Mali Empire, So what they're going to do is that all the businesses, exporters and importers who are interested in the AfCFTA, you register under the due diligence system. The Afro-Exim Bank will conduct due diligence on you, your financial base, and then the products. And if they are authentic, then immediately somebody wants to import from you or you want to export to other countries, they can confirm within some hours that you are a reputable company, and then the transaction can be completed within some short time. So the expectation is that when you use this, initially it may take about 48 hours, but after some time, less than 12 hours, you can get your money involved. And the Afro-Exim Bank has also allocated some funding to support this payment system in order to boost intra-African trade.
All right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, our time is up. We have been talking about a lot of things today, and next time we're going to try and break them down into angles where we can talk about boosting intra-Africa trade on the one hand, we can talk about financial technology on the other hand, and other hands we could talk about the rules of origin and other things, including the movement of people and goods across our borders. And so we have been talking about boosting intra-Africa trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, with Mr. Anthony Nyamibe, Ghana's Chief Trade Negotiator on the AFCFTA and Senior Technical Officer at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We have been talking to Superintendent Simon Asaase, Head of International Relations and Cooperation Section at the Ghana Immigration Service. We have also been talking to Mr. Bernard Moniafra, Senior Research and Planning Officer, Ghana International Trade Commission. And finally, we have been talking to Mr. Chonam Clems Akpelu, CEO of Suku Technology and AGI Greater Accra Chairman. It's been a wonderful time having you guys here with us, and we hope to continue this discussion, and we will be doing this in angles as time goes on. Thank you very much again. My name is Prince Moses, and it's been a pleasure being with you on Asaase Business Roundtable. We'll see you again next week. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.